Hey America, stop what you're doing. So let's talk about this insurrection act right now, because I'm going to tell you what is really happening as of right now. So Trump has been sending troops to multiple cities. This is actually a war strategy. Basically get the troops inside the city, so when civil war starts and other governors start using their own National Guard against the National Guard he now has troops in place ready to fight back. This is exactly what is going on, and this is what they're not really telling you in the White House. Because somebody that has spent time in the military, this is more of a strategic move than an actual move to fight crime. This has nothing to do with crime. This is preparing for civil war, because we know what's going to happen. Just like the governor in Oregon has now said, I will use the National Guard in order to defend citizens against the National Guard that Trump has now sent. What do you think this is actually going to end up being? This is really about to be a civil war. You're about to see unalivings like crazy in the streets of Chicago, Portland, and places like California. I'm just saying, it's about to get a lot more uglier before it starts getting better. And I just wish we didn't have to go down this road, but the only people I can blame is, MAGA.
About to be in a civil war if the Democrats, quote, keep playing these games. He said this in response to a question about the ICE facility mass unaliving that occurred yesterday in Texas. Just take a look at this.
But the radical left is causing this problem, not the right, the radical left. And it's going to get worse, and ultimately it's going to go back on them. I mean, bad things happen when they play these games. And I'll give you a little clue. The right is a lot tougher than the left.
So let's just start with the facts. There's absolutely no evidence that this guy was a Democrat, left-winger tied to any progressive organization. Acting U.S. Attorney Nancy Larson says his words were definitely anti-ICE. That said, we did not find any evidence of membership to any specific group or entity. However, there was a handwritten note found where he expressed hatred towards the federal government. And that backs up the claims that were made by this guy's friends. They said he was a libertarian who hated both political parties and the government. But Donald Trump and all of his little puppets don't care about the truth or reality. They see a tragedy happen, then they start thinking of ways they can use this to divide the American people even farther. And notice that Donald Trump did not condemn violence or call for peace whatsoever. He did the exact opposite. He threatened that the right is tougher and that bad things will happen if they get energized. That's not leadership at all. That is direct incitement. He is trying to start a civil war in the United States. Presidents are supposed to lower the temperature in this country, not raise it every...
Donald Trump is preparing to declare martial law. This is the reason he's sending troops into Portland, Los Angeles, Chicago, Memphis, Baltimore, etc. He will continue doing this. Once he has these troops in place, he can declare martial law and freeze each one of these cities. This is how he's going to take control of all the places that voted against him. This is how he will control the midterms and possibly eliminate all elections in the future. I mentioned this back in April when Liz Cheney came out and said that he was about to declare martial law, and I got thousands and thousands of comments from people saying, oh, you're a nut job, you're crazy, Liz Cheney is crazy, this isn't going to happen. I said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I have known this clown for 30 years, and if you've never met this guy, you have no idea what he's capable of. Believe me, this is the most dangerous man right now because we gave him all this power in...
This is insane. The question is, are we in civil war? Because there's a lot of talk about civil war and whether we are headed to civil war. There's no question about it. We are in civil war. This is what it looks like at the beginning of this civil war in this country. I think we've been in civil war for quite a while. If you don't believe that we were in a civil war, or at least the beginning stages of a civil war, prior to January 6th, that's one thing. But I don't see how after January 6th, you don't see that we are in civil war. Now, you might not like to think about it that way, but that's exactly how MAGA thinks about it. They are at war with you, whether you want to accept that or not. And let me tell you something else. When someone is at war with you, and you fail to acknowledge that you are in a war, who do you think's going to win that war? The side that knows they're at war and is fighting it as a war, or the side that says, nah, we're not at war. It's just isolated incidents of political violence, not a war. You want to know how it's a war? Let me give you another example. We now have the President of the United States not only talking about war with the American people, not only telling his generals that they will be fighting a war on the streets of this country against American citizens, who he brands the enemy within, but he is actually sending the military into those city streets against the wishes of those states. We have Trump now sending the military into Chicago. The governor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois and the mayor of Chicago have both said, not only is your help not needed, it is not wanted, we do not want you here, do not send troops here. In fact, they have now sued the Trump administration to try to block his deployment of the National Guard into Chicago. But here's how it looks even more like a civil war. If you don't think a president of the United States sending the military into blue cities and states that he doesn't like, if you don't think that looks like a civil war, consider this. We now have red states sending their National Guard into blue states against their wishes. The governor of Texas, the despicable Greg Abbott, has said to Donald Trump, hey, use our National Guard. We want to be part of this. Send our National Guard. We will put our National Guard voluntarily under your command for you to send them into Chicago. We want to be part of that fight. We want our Texas National Guard to use.
All right, things are off the rails. You need to share this information. Eric Swalwell, senator from California, just got out of his committee meeting, and he reported that every single Republican has voted to deport U.S. citizens, to take citizens of the United States and send them to another country, to a prison, who knows? I don't know how to make it any more clearer that we are entering 1930s Germany. That's what they did. They took German citizens and sent them to Poland, to camps. And that's what Republicans want to do. Do we understand now how their intentions are to turn this country into a fascist dictatorship? Now, this would have to go through the House and the Senate to pass, but this is their intentions. They are on board with sending U.S. citizens. They're not saying which crimes they would even be guilty of, and send them out of this country. So what is it?
So America's second civil war just began. If you didn't hear. Greg Abbott, governor of Texas, and Trump both agreed to send hundreds of National Guardsmen from Texas into Illinois because Illinois isn't doing too great. And Trump and Abbott completely disregarded Illinois' governor, J.B. Pritzker, his wishes, saying, I don't want this. I don't need it. I am a state. I can govern myself. That's how it's supposed to be. And the federal government's supposed to be a mediator when they can't. The federal government has a huge hand. And right now that hand is reaching across state lines and quite literally picking up troops and weapons and setting them in another state just to see what happens. There's no high crime rate in Illinois, specifically Chicago, more than there ever has been. As a matter of fact, they're at like a 5-year low. Coincidentally, so is DC. They're at a 30-year low, yet troops were still deployed. The same thing's about to happen in Portland, Oregon. But the thing about Portland, Oregon is they have slightly different laws up there because states have different laws. That's why we are here. We're a united states, but with different beliefs and laws. And when we can't agree, the federal government is supposed to mediate, not take over and dictate. But in Oregon, what's going to happen, I guarantee, is they're not going to pull troops outside of that state to deploy into that state. It's going to be Oregon National Guardsmen that are overseas getting pulled back home. And they will be the ones deployed in that state. And again, this is the federal government just reaching, picking, poking, just to see what happens, just to see what they can get away with. This civil war is going to escalate within the next week and a half. I guarantee it. And you had no fucking clue until just now.
So if you missed it, just like the authoritarians always do, Stephen Miller slipped up and said the quiet part out loud. Just for some background context, Miller was talking on CNN about how he claimed that the judge who was trying to block Trump's attempt to deploy the National Guard to Portland, Stephen Miller called that a legal insurrection. So remember that.
Well, the administration filed an appeal this morning with the Ninth Circuit. I would note the administration won an identical case in the Ninth Circuit just a few months ago with respect to the federalizing of the California National Guard. Under Title 10 of the U.S. Code, the president has plenary authority.
Stephen? Stephen? And then the anchor was like, oh, we seem to have some kind of a technical glitch. No, if you had a technical glitch, he wouldn't have stopped talking and been looking back. You saw how he was looking around. He knows he fucked up. He said plenary authority. Now, what does that mean? Well, by strict dictionary definition, it means absolute. Because that shit is straight out of Project 2025 saying that Trump has absolute power. You know, like in Russia or North Korea. I'm sure you won't be shocked to learn that Title 10 does not say that the president has absolute power. Title 10 describes the many ways the president can deploy the military or the National Guard, but it also says he has to abide by the Constitution. It does say that in certain cases of insurrection, if he deploys the Insurrection Act, that the president can order the military to do domestic policing. It is the one way they can go against the Posse Comitatus Act, which he's basically been ignoring anyway. But also, the War Powers Resolution states that if the president does that, he can only do that with the US troops for 60 days. I bet he didn't know that. And that is why he and people like Stephen Miller are constantly calling what's happening in these peaceful cities an insurrection, because they want to lay the groundwork to be like, see, we said it was an insurrection, so now we got to do the Insurrection Act. He is marching his stormtroopers into these cities where nothing is fucking happening and the governors are telling him nothing's happening, and then when the people peacefully protest that military occupation, he says, oh look, it's an insurrection! But remember January 6th, where people literally broke into a federal building and tried to unalive the vice president and other politicians? That was just a day of love! But now Stephen Miller's just outright saying it. Well, Joe Biden, obviously, he was a tyrant, but Trump has absolute power! Because Stephen Miller knows that the only way they can avoid the horrible midterms that are in store for them is if they somehow claim that the entire United States loves Donald Trump but also is trying to do an insurrection. So we have to put the entire country under military lockdown and we have to just delay these elections because forever reasons. And since they are terrified of those midterms coming up, Trump and Pee Wee German are doing everything they can in order to turn the country into their own little Bergen-Belsen.